Hi, everyone. This is Professor Moffett-Bateau. And as you all know, your first major writing assignment is due tomorrow, the midterm, or otherwise known as the overview of previous arguments, otherwise known as literature review, right? And so today and across the weekend, I have been receiving a flood of panicked emails from students in 319 as well as 409. Particularly those of you that are feeling unsure about the assignment. And so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to walk you through some of the most commonly asked questions that are in my inbox right now. And then I'm also going to kind of point you all to some of the resources that are available to you in the class, right? I think one of the toughest transitions that a number of you have had to make is this transition from in-person learning to remote learning, right? It's not something that you guys got to choose. And so for a lot of folks, this may not be their preferred learning style, right? In some ways, it is a lot easier for teacher and students if, I'm getting up in front of the classroom every day and you can ask questions before and after class, right? On the other hand, there are some things that folks prefer about remote learning, mostly that if you miss a class, those classes stay online for the rest of the semester, right? And so you continuously have those resources to check in with, right? The tough part about it, though, is that you don't always know what you miss if you miss a week or you skip a couple weeks. I've spoken to a number of you who have missed most, if not all, of the semester, right? And so that makes it particularly hard because I'm not there in person. You can't meet me at my office, right? And so part of the reason why I'm going to walk you through this video is so that you can know what resources are out there that I've created and that other folks have created for your mini questions. Okay, so if you give me a second, I am going to enable screen sharing. And this is going to allow us to kind of walk through what the resources are that are available to you in terms of helping you move through this course, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys these resources on the Politics 319 course. But for Politics 409, remember that you have the same resources, except the resources I'm showing you will just be listed as regular weeks under course materials. They won't be under optional research skill development. Okay, so say I am a student who is in Politics 319. I am freaked out about this semester. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be writing for this literature review. What do I do, right? Well, the very first thing that I would recommend that you do is that you go to the assignment section and you scroll down, you scroll down, you scroll down, you scroll down, and you go to the final research paper guidelines and you open them up, right? And then you would also, I would recommend, open up the literature review and final research paper rubric. Okay. Now I have both of these materials. What do I do? Well, first, I'm going to take a look at the literature review and final research paper guidelines, right? Now, remember, if you're in Politics 409, these guidelines are going to be different for you. But the following deadlines, turn-in instructions, all of that are exactly the same for both classes. So, what does the first piece of information tell you? That the first 5 pages of your paper, the literature review, is due on November 17th, 2020. So this includes an introduction that should be 1 to 2 pages plus your literature review, right? all papers must be turned in via Blackboard under the assignments section by noon Eastern on their due date. And remember, I have changed the late assignment policy. Please look to the updated late assignment video under course information. So everything must be MLA citation format. For the midterm, again, you're turning in the first 5 pages. For your final, you're turning in the complete 8 to 10 pages, right? And so you must have the introduction and the overview of previous arguments, right? And so this talk tells us what you need to do for that first half of the paper, right? So your paper has to be organized around the research question, and the literature review addresses what other scholars have presented as the answer to your question. What did they get wrong? What did they get right? What are holes in the literature that you're feeling, right? These are the fundamental questions that you have to ask in your literature review. Okay. So now that I've looked at the kind of assignment specifications, I want to look at the rubric and see what information that has, right? Oh, I think I pulled it up on Word. Here we are. Okay. So again, you're going to be most interested in this first page, right? So did you meet the writing guidelines for your paper, right? And in particular, we're going to look at what would exceed the standards for the sections that apply to the midterm, right? The writing guidelines. Is your paper 5 pages? Is it double spaced, 12-point font, 1-inch margins? Is the paper organized around your central argument? Is your central argument framed in the kind of Booth simple framework? And do you have consistency with the theme, right? For this particular class in politics 319, it's, how does it relate to questions of gender and the law? For politics 409, it's just how does this question relate to the study of political science, right? And then to exceed standards, your introduction will be engaging. It states the central argument and it previews the structure of the paper. And then for your overview of the previous arguments, where you present your peer-reviewed secondary data, in order to exceed the standard, the overview of previous arguments addresses what other scholars have presented as the answer to the writer's question. It's clear what other scholars got wrong and how the writer's argument is groundbreaking, right? If you want to simply meet the standard, right? The overview of previous arguments addresses what other scholars have presented as the answer to the writer's question. It's clear what other scholars got wrong and ideally what they got right, right? And everything else would not meet standard, okay? And so for your literature review, right, you are concerned with the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections or the first page of the research paper rubric, right? So far we've looked at the assignment guidelines for the literature review in the final research paper, and we've also looked at the rubric, both of which, again, whether you're in Politics 409 or 319, can be found under the assignments tab that's here to the left, right? Okay, so say I look at all of that and I'm still like, Professor Moffett-Bateau, I still have no idea what to do. Well, you're in luck, right? Because we have course materials that speak to exactly this, right? Now, first, you want to go back to week 3 and you want to make sure that you've read the craft of research section, how to create arguments. And you want to go back through creating a central argument, what counts as evidence, how to use quotes, and most importantly, how to create a simple argument, right? So how do you create an argument that makes sense and is to the point, right? And so this is what is covered in this section, creating a central argument, right? And so you want to make sure that you use this and that your introduction and your paper writ large is organized around that framework, and that you understand these distinctions between primary data and secondary data. At this point, I think I've had conversations with almost everyone in both classes about that. And so hopefully you all are all feeling confident about that. But if you're not, it's here in week 3 for both classes. Okay, so we look at that and we still have no idea what's going on. You're in luck, there's more class materials. So if you're in Politics 319, you're going to go down and click on this link called Optional Research Skill Development. And so remember what I said in the announcement about this folder about a month or so ago, that this is additional material so that if you don't know how to write a research paper, if you've never done a literature review, if you don't have that information already, go to this section and this will walk you through it, right? Now, if you're in Politics 409, what you're going to do instead is you're going to sign in to your class as always. You're going to go to course materials, and it's going, the weeks I'm going to talk about are just here in your course materials folder. Whereas again, if you're in 319, you go to course materials and then you go to optional research skill development. Okay, so what's next? So, excuse me, the first thing that you want to do is I would recommend taking a glance at week 5, creating a qualitative project, right? Now, this first video goes into some depth about setting up your research design, but also what the function is of the various sections of your paper, right? And so if you're clicking on this video, and I go up to you, and really you should all watch this entire video because many of the questions you all have about all kinds of things, including how to do qualitative coding, is covered in this video 1, video 2, and video 3 in week 5, right? So as you can see here, starting on, and let me make sure I tell you all the truth about where it starts, right? So if you go to the 4 minutes in, right? This is where I start talking about specifically these different sections of your paper, right? I talk through what are some of the ways to think through the literature review, but what I am really encouraging all of you who have a number of questions about how to do qualitative coding, and you felt like some of the content analysis videos that we watched in week 9 and week 10 were too complicated. Week 5, video 1 has a very, very simple explanation. Again, for 319, this is under optional research skill development. For 409, this is just part of your week 5 assignment. So you should have already been familiar with this material, right? Okay, so say you listen to my video and you're still feeling at a loss. Well, not to worry. There are even more materials for you to take a look at, right? So, you can take a look at week 6 and kind of think about your data more generally. You can take a look at week 7, right? And this is where I go in depth about what peer-reviewed data is, right? Now, I also talked about that in week 2 and week 3 and week 4, but here is an in-depth conversation with one of the associate librarians at John Jay College, how to identify peer-reviewed materials, and then how to find them using the John Jay OneSearch. Excuse me. So you really want to take a look at this video if you haven't. But if you're going to look at this video, I recommend clicking up here on the title and then going into the contents of the videos and looking through the timestamp so that you can get to the pieces that are most useful for you. Because this is an 1.5-hour video, I don't recommend that you watch it all in one go, but you do want to look at some of these pieces, right? Which sources are appropriate? Is it okay to use partisan sources? Is it okay to use government resources? How to get better research search results, right? What is peer review? How do I know if something is credible secondary data, right? All of this stuff is incredibly important to asking and figuring out what to do with your literature review. In addition to that, we have week 11, which goes in and has an entire section on doing the literature review, right? So there's a section at John Jay Library that goes over doing a literature review. There's actually an article that goes into detail. And these videos create a very easy and accessible way of understanding the function of the literature review. Again, for Politics 409, this is under week 11. For Politics 319, this is under optional research skill development, right? And so you have some readings you can reference and multiple videos on how to do so, right? And they're all videos that are meant for undergraduate students. But in addition to that, I also have some materials under week 12. In particular, there is a lecture with an attached slide deck that goes into how to do the literature review, right? So if you are unsure about what the literature review requires of you, right, you can go over this slide deck, right? And so it goes here and talks about a lot of the things that I've just talked to you about, right? What parts of the assignment are a part of the literature review assignment, how should you think about meeting the requirements, you know, all of these things that I've said in various announcements, in multiple videos, and so on and so forth, is all kind of condensed here in this slide deck, right? And so it really goes into detail in kind of consolidating all of this information, right? So it talks about how to do the introduction, how to do the literature review. You know, and then there's a second slide deck, which I won't go into now, which talks about how to write the rest of the final paper. And there's also some videos on how to do MLA citation style, because a number of you have struggled with your in-text citations in particular, as well as how to do the appropriate MLA bibliography citation style. And so I would really recommend that you walk through these videos, but also to click on this link here, because it will actually help you create citations in the right framework, right? And then down here, there's a brief video that goes over how to write a strong introduction and conclusion for any paper. For this particular paper, you will not have to write a conclusion, right? For the literature review, you do not have to write a conclusion, right? Again, it's just the introduction, which can be 1 to 2 pages, and then the literature review, which depending on the length of your introduction, will either be 3 or 4 pages, right? You'll have an introduction for the literature review. For the final paper, you'll have an introduction and a conclusion. And so hopefully this answers a good chunk of the questions that a number of you have about how to access these resources that you need in order to make sure that you're writing a strong paper. Now, let me make sure that I pull up your questions so that I can make sure that I've answered them all in full. Okay, first question. I'm a bit confused on how to incorporate my interviews in my paper. Would it be okay to summarize the individual's experiences into my paper? For the interviews, should I also summarize that or insert my interviews word for word? I think this would exceed the page limit. So remember that for the midterm that's due tomorrow, you're not doing any data analysis and you're not presenting your data, right? You're only doing the introduction and the literature review. And so any of you that have questions about what is the best way to present your data, if you're in Politics 409, you're just going to go into the course materials. If you're in Politics 319, you're going to go into course materials, and then you're going to go into optional research skill development. And again, you're going to go to week 5, creating a qualitative research project, where I go into detail about how to set up your research design, including how to write and think about the literature review, how to gather and present your data, and how to do analysis using coding, and then how to present your data, right? So what are some ways that you can present your data in the context of your actual paper, right? So what should it look like? Should you use word for word quotes? Should you use charts and all of these kind of things? And then I also have another video on qualitative coding using deduce. And this is in addition to the week that all of you have on Politics 409. It's week 8. In Politics 319, it's week 9, where I go in depth about how to do safe interviewing, as well as doing content analysis on television, as well as in text, right? So these, there's a couple of links that kind of show you different ways to do content analysis. These 2 videos kind of talk about research analysis. This one does how to newspaper-based analysis, and they can be a bit difficult, right? However, the one that you should, if you do nothing else, try to watch my video, how to do newspaper-based content analysis, because it's actually me walking through office hours with one of your colleagues as I show him how to do content analysis, right? And so once you do this kind of thematic coding with content analysis and you look at these weeks on presentation of the data, I think you'll have a much better sense of what is expected from you. Okay, but again, right, for this assignment that's due on Tuesday, November 17th, your interviews don't play a role in that. Okay, so this question, I know the first 2 pages are introduction. Are the rest of the pages basically a summary? Do I need to include evidence? Do I need to summarize all of the articles that I'm using? For these questions, you're going to find your most solid answers within the course material section of and under research skill development if you're in 319, and just under week 11 and 12 if you're writing, if you're in 409, right? So again, go to week 5 and watch the overviews. I talk about what is expected in the literature review versus the rest of the paper. And then go to week 11, look at some overviews of how to do and write a literature review. And week 12 goes into even more detail about what's in the literature review and what's in everything else. To put it simply, right, for your literature review assignment, the introduction can be 1 page, the literature review can be 3 to 4 pages, right? So if your literature review is 1 page, if your introduction is 1 page and your literature review needs to be 4 pages, if your introduction is 2 pages and your literature review needs to be 3 pages, your entire midterm must be 4 page. I mean, your entire literature review midterm assignment must be 5 pages, 5 complete pages, no more, no less. And it must also include a bibliography or a reference cited, right? You do not, again, present any data here. You will always provide citations if you make claims of fact, but you should be speaking directly to what is being argued in these peer-reviewed articles, right? And so you're going to be using 4 peer-reviewed textual sources. They could be 4 peer-reviewed books, they could be 4 peer-reviewed articles, they could be a mixture of books and articles, what have you, right? They cannot be press releases, they can't be research reports from think tanks, they can't be magazine or newspaper articles. Your literature review must have 4 peer-reviewed textual sources, right? You must go over what are the central arguments made by each author, what was their research question, what was their method, what was their findings, and what were the strengths and what were the shortcomings of the paper, and how does their argument relate to the argument that you're making, right? For every peer-reviewed source, all 4 of them that you're using in your literature review, all of that information should be there, right? For each one. So the way that some students do it is they take 2 articles that they agree with and 2 articles that they disagree with. They start with the article that they most disagree with, then the one they disagree with a little less, the one they agree with the least, and the one they agree with the most. And they kind of they build on top of each other, right? Because the idea is to have this literature in conversation with each other, right? And so you start with these 2 papers that you disagree with so that you can really point out, okay, here are the arguments they made, here are the questions, here are the findings and conclusions they made, but they got A, B, and C wrong, and my paper is an improvement on this because of X, right? But now I'm going to present these articles or books that I do agree with, and I'm going to speak to how my research is building upon theirs, right? Because the literature review is going to be key to your discussion section at the final paper, right? But again, you really should be reading on and going over all of the material I just reviewed, because that'll make more sense, right? You need to have a kind of holistic understanding of the entire project and the expectations, right? Okay, next question. I have a question. I'm getting confused about the research paper guideline. Can you please clarify me? In the format below, is it for the literature review or the final 8 to 10 research paper? This framework is for both, right? So remember that this constitutes the entire 8 to 10 page paper, right? As I've said before, for the literature review, you are simply doing, sorry about that, you are simply writing up the introduction, the overview of previous arguments, and then you'll have a references cited page that does not count towards your page count total, right? So this introduction and your overview of previous arguments, which is your peer-reviewed secondary data, should be 5 pages. Okay, so this next question was as follows. I wanted to reach out to you and ask if there's any way you can guide me on writing a good literature review section. I'm so lost. I continue to read the articles you posted and watch the videos as well, and I still cannot come up with a way to approach this section. I started off writing my literature review as propaganda has been studied in the US in previous articles, journals, and novels, you know, so on and so forth. I do not know what sources should be evaluated first. I'm concerned I'll write nonsense. Do you think you can help me before the deadline, right? So hopefully I can be of help, right? So I would really encourage you to go back in particular and look at week 11 and week 12. But you also may find that first video in week 5 to be useful too, because I try to present you with a number of different ways that you can approach this question, right? Now, as I just said, I think the easiest way to approach the literature review is by thinking about it in terms of two sources that you disagree with, and then two sources that you agree with that you're building your literature review on, and then remembering that you need to tell me the central argument, the research question, the methods, and the findings, as well as what they got right and what they got wrong, and how your research is filling in those gaps, right? And then for the one you agree with the most, instead of thinking about how is your research filling in those gaps, thinking about how your research is building on top of it. But you have to remember that this assignment is fundamentally different from the book reports or the reviews that you've written for humanities essays, right? Like, I'm not asking for a simple overview or review of what you've read. I am looking in your literature review for a critical analysis of what you've read, and how are all these sources in conversation with one another, right? To what extent are they agreeing with one another? What are the conflicts in the field? What are the points of agreeing in the field? This is where you show me all of this work, right? You've been reading and researching this topic since September, and so you have a good sense of the literature. So don't let your nerves undermine you, right? You know what you're doing. You've been reading about this one topic since mid-September. It's mid-November now. You have a good sense of what people in the literature writ large are saying about this topic. And so let me know, right? Tell me why you chose these particular articles to represent the field. What do they tell me about the ways in which the field has attempted to answer this question? If the field hasn't answered the question, then why do you think that is, right? Is it because this is a really hard type of methodological question to answer? Is it because there's a kind of unified disinterest in your topic? Has it been answered ad nauseum and you found some fresh and new approach? So, tell me what's going on in the field, critically analyze each of your peer-reviewed textual sources, and then go from there. But I think you're going to do great. All of you are going to do great. Okay. Can I send you a draft of my literature review? I want to make sure I'm meeting the requirements. Unfortunately, I do, as I've said to many of you, I don't read drafts via email. If any of you wanted to have me read a draft, the best thing to have done would have been to make a research, an office hours appointment with me last Thursday, and I will go over your papers as we are in the meeting together. But in general, it would give too much of an unfair advantage to some students if I was looking over complete drafts prior to you turning them in the first time, right? So I think that's pretty much it. This has been a much longer video than I intended. And it seems like that's the case with most of my videos for you guys, but my hope is to provide you all with as much complete information as possible so that you feel empowered to take risks and try things on and develop as researchers and scholars, right? You're gonna do great on this assignment. If you've been working on your research and you've written your revisions and you turn in your annotated, you already know what to do because you've already read so much of this material. So just trust yourself, trust the work that you've been reading, trust the work that you've put in to learn the course materials. If you're in 319, you've been reading the work about gender in the law and brushing up on your research skills. If you're in 409, you're writing a big paper like you've never written before graduation, and you can do it. I have full faith in all of you that you have what it takes to do this. So keep pushing, do your best. I have full faith in you, and try not to stress out too much. It's gonna be great. Okay, good luck.